Greetings, greetings, greetings. It is I, your king, Clifford Jefferson L. Bay, ascendant and descendant from the royal family of the Plantagenet Crown, under King Godfrey the Fifth Count of Anjou, son of Folk, the King of Jerusalem. This is the King Bench, and here's Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont, bringing you a very important message in regards to the King's Bench judicial notice in regards to the formation of the Constitution of the United States of America. This is going to be real brief. It's going to be paramount because, as you can see, a lot of people have a misunderstanding about the jurisdiction that governs the estate and what we here call North America, and this needs to be cleared up. We have a lot of teachers who teach about these things, but does not have a clue about what it is that they're talking about. One of the persons that I like to mention is Taj Tariq Bey. Whatever affiliation he has with the Moorish Science Temple of America, as well as any of those who are identified by the self-classification as Moors, those who are classified as American citizens, Native Americans, and whatever other self-classifications that you choose to call yourself in regards to our right and regards to birthright here in North America, in lieu of the liberties such as life, liberty, and property. None of these things you're entitled to in regards to you're being born here or colonizing here or settling here. Because as you see, me and the King's Bench under Archbishop Belmont went through these things conclusively. So I let Archbishop make his introduction, and we can get right in on this quick notice and historical notice of the formation of the Constitution for the state of New Jersey.
Peace and love, angels. This is your Archbishop Belmont from the Royal House of Belmont that goes back to the Royal House of Plantagenet, as well as the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Portugal, Sicily, Andalus, which many people may call Spain, and other various kingdoms that I spoke about earlier. And today, with this judicial notice from the King's Bench, we're going to not only qualify what we're saying, but we're going to disqualify every other so-called nationality that have settled on English soil, which you have misnomered and called America. And, you know, many people are going to try to refute the truth. The truth, you know, sometimes need a little push so others can actually see it, because it must be moved. And those who choose not to accept the truth for what it is, whatever your fate is lying under your so-called self-identification, that is yours. So with that being said, without further ado, let's Dr. King go ahead and get this judicial message or judicial notice going.
Greetings again. I'm your king, Clifford Jefferson, ascendant and descendant from the House of Godfrey under the Plantagenet Crown, which governs the jurisdiction here, what we now call in this modern day New Jersey. It's just going to be a reiteration of what we have said in our past lessons in regards to the trail that we're leading. Archbishop said paper crumbs or jewels. You know, you can self-identify it like as you want, but they're paramount to your very existence on this particular planet, which we call Earth. And we're giving you a mountain view, or should I say an air view, of what it is that you're able to see as you look down. And as we get closer to the landmass, which we call our state, which we have not, or no one has made a claim to until this point, which I, your King Clifford Jefferson, assisted by Archbishop Belmont of the King's Bench. So we pretty much just want to go to what it is we spoke in previous lessons. And for those who have subscribed to this channel, there's no way of cutting corners. If you're starting the course from A to Z, if the road is straight, or if the road is curved, or if the road is zigzag, there's no way you're going to get to the other end of that road until you go the path of the road which it leads. And a lot of our brothers and sisters try to jump and go directly to the end. But what's the sense of going to the end when you don't have no knowledge of the path it took for you to get to the end? That's the purpose of the justification of why you got to the end. So whoever it is at the end of the road, who is at that gate, he's going to question you on what it is that you learned on your journey to the end of where you need to be. Okay, so once again, we're just reiterating past lessons that we went through in regards to what we call Anglo-American. All right, there's a map again, so you brothers and sisters can see. I'll blow it up. It does not show the continents of Africa, Asia, or Europe. It does not show the continents of United Kingdom, such as Ireland, Scotland, and England. So you see an Anglo-American. We're going to go to the Afro-Eurasia map. This is all so-called the TNO map. For those who can be able to view the map according to the understanding that we provided for you in previous podcasts. Give me 1 second. This is the map of what we call Afro-Eurasia, the old world. Now, Anglo-America, the map I just showed you prior to this one, was never discovered yet. All right, according to the description as in the Manifest Destiny, as stated by Thomas Jefferson, when he purchased Louisiana territory, which is under the jurisdiction of the Plantagenet Crown, which consists of the kings of England and France, by way of taking back the land from settlers or colonists through colonialism, such as the Vikings or the Northmen, which we gave an excellent lesson on the previous podcast that we did. But here you see a world view map of Eurasia, such as Africa, Asia, and Europe, which consists of the United Kingdom, which is Ireland, England, and Scotland. Okay, so let's go back down here and show you Afro-Eurasia one more time. This right here. I mean Anglo-American one more time, just to show you and get the distinction of what we're talking about. This is Anglo-American. So now the question becomes, if this has nothing to do with Africa, Eurasia, or Asia, then there's only two parties in reference here, Anglo and America. I'm gonna say it again, Anglo and America. And under the family crest of Anglo, it says French, as we prove that the earliest settlement here in North America was either Spanish, or French. Okay, please pay very close attention. Let's go back here. American frontier. The American frontier, also known as the Old West or the Wild West, includes the geography, history, folklore, and cultural expression of the life in the forward wave of American expansion that began with the European settlement in the early 17th century, and ended with the admission of the last few territories as states in the 1912. So here you can see a list of them, and you see here the 13 colonies. But you see New Sweden and New Netherland, which is what we call Jersey today, New Jersey, which prior to it be calling New Sweden or New Netherland, it was under Jersey, which is the flag you see before us, behind us, rather. So now let's get an idea of the so-called America, because we don't want to be confused, because the map says Anglo-America, all right? And we're dealing with land, which means the estate, because land is real property. And you can't have personal property or a personal estate without land, because I know you ain't can't hold it on sea. You would drown. You know, we got to think, brothers and sisters. It's either you're drowned or you're on the ship. And in this case, you are on the ship, because most of us are registered, or most of you are registered in your townships, which has the ending parts known as the ship under laws of admiralty and maritime law. And, you know, a lot of the language that's used on these podcasts from other people who teach is language that will confuse you. So you got to go back to he who wrote those books, so you can get a concrete versus an abstract understanding, in which most of the podcasts that you hear of speak in this language, abstract, which we're going to show you a clip from Taj Tariq, who speaks about the language of abstract and concrete, but does not explain what they are. 13 colonies. The 13 colonies, also known as the 13 British colonies, also, or the 13th American colonies. So the word colonies, British colonies, or American colonies are synonymous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say it again. The 13 colonies, the British colonies, or the American colonies are synonymous. There's another map again. Spain, French territories, and the British colonies, all right, which are settlers or colonies by way of colonialism. And we all know what colonialism is,
Mm-hmm.
all right? So as we've seen it from a world's view, where is it at? Anglo-America. We know that the Anglo-America deals with the 13 colonies, or the American colonies, or the British colonies, which are synonymous. Contrast to Anglo. And Anglo is not affiliated or associated according to the Eurasian map or the Afro-Eurasian map, but deals with the continent of Africa, Europe, and Asia. Okay, let's go here for a minute, because we all know from the biblical standpoint, when we said that the angels went to the four corners of the world carrying messages to all the people about God's word. All right? Now, Thomas Jefferson, which is my surname, Jefferson, which is Godfrey, which Godfrey the fifth Caliban Jew, ruled the kingdom of England and France, who was the son of Fulk the fifth, who ruled Jerusalem, which Jesus was ruling, or the so-called person identified as Jesus. Okay? So we know, according to the manifest destiny, that our angel is shown carrying messages to what we call the West, because according to the TNO map, which is the map of Afro-Eurasia, the message that was sent to that particular territory was the angel from the north, the angel from the east, and the angel from the south. So now we're missing the angel from the west. So where did the angel go? Let's see. Just show you a picture of it. I'm on French colonization, no wonder. Here we go. Manifest destiny. As you see, an angel. So this is the angel that was sent to the west in lieu of the manifest destiny by way of what we call colonialism, setting up colonies known as settlements by foreigners, which we call the 13 colonies, which are the British colonies, now known as the American colonies. Pay attention. And this particular territory which we reside at is what we call New Jersey, which was under the jurisdiction of territory what we call Jersey, which was under the jurisdiction of France and England under the kings and queens of the Plantagenet crown, which descended down from the kings and queens of the houses of Wessex, okay? Which were not the ethnicity of this angel you see here. Mm-hmm. Because they colonized the land. The land did not belong to them, because when you colonize the land by way of colonialism, this is under the government of the laws of what we call the right of discovery by right of of discovery by what we call right of conquest, which also all took place in what we call the era of the Renaissance, which we discussed in yesterday's lesson. Okay, so if you're viewing this one or this judicial notice, go watch this lesson after you finish watching this one. All right. I wish we'd have did this Archbishop before we did that lesson because it's been much more meaningful.
Yeah.
And go ahead and give remarks on that.
And once again, don't let none of these images fool you in regards to complexion. Like you already know that they did a number in regards to whitewashing our history, which is your mystery. So you will get lost if you're constantly trying to put or see yourself in a lot of these images, because it may not happen. You're actually going to have to go through on a quest to find a lot of the pictures that's going to look like you.
Mm-hmm. And that, like I said, this was done through the age of the Renaissance, through what we call the medieval crisis, which we talked about already. So let's move forward. As we've seen through the maps that were shown, the map of Afro-Eurasia and the map of Anglo-America, there was no angel sent to the unknown world. The angel that was sent to the unknown world was based off colonization. But we know that there were indigenous people here in what we call now North America, in which many podcasts speak of. Our podcast speaks of the same indigenous people here, but we're letting you know that these people were English.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, most of the Revolutionary War took place in what we call the jurisdictions of what we call Parliament, which was ruled under one royal colony, which was the Kingdom of England, or what we call the Dominion of England. Let's go here. All this, Jersey, Delaware. George Washington crossed the Delaware River. Mm-hmm. So all this is belongs to the English, not the 13 colonies, who are the British colonies, who are the American colonies, who colonized a territory that was already inhabited by the Anglo-Saxon people, which was called Normandy. Okay, we're going to prove this, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
We're about to validate this even further. But let's first hear how there's some people who already got knowledge of this, but chose to choose the side that colonized because they received some type of power. We know power is illusion, is a result of force, nothing more. And the so-called people who hold these podcasts are leading you as sheep for the slaughter. They're telling you how to own or take control of your estate, which are what? The net worth of the assets of a person, whether dead or alive, because he continually use the word persons, and he also defines the word persons, which deals with the estate, whether you're dead or alive, in lieu of the right, entitlement, and interest to. But he doesn't tell you about the estate under intel, which is not governed under what they call a treaty or constitution. Because the treaty is just something agreement between parties based off territory governed underneath what we call the certificate of incorporation, which is the deed, which is America is only free and simple, which means that you can occupy the land, you can use the land, but you can't sell it. It must be held in fee and tell, which is fee and tell. Why? Because it's a feudal system created by William the Conqueror when he invaded what we call America today in Maine and Massachusetts Bay. And then we also got a Massachusetts down there by Virginia, which the federal government was created from, okay, on the Potomac River. All right, so it's very paramount that you heed this judicial notice on the King's Bench. Let's go further. All right, where is it at? So now let's hear it from one of your leaders, and pay very close attention because the King Bench wants you to take this information back to your teachers. We're not saying this to hurt them, but we're saying this for you to hold them accountable. Absolutely. One of the sisters, not to cut you off, Archbishop, one of the sisters responded to my comment to College to be Baked in regards to showing them concrete proof of what it is that he's showing them that in the nature of its verbiage, it's abstract. So the lady reached out and said, well, would you please provide the podcast or the website, which I did. So if any of y'all is inquiring just like her, then I suggest that you look at this channel created by Taj Tariq Bey on behalf of the land and its people, in regards to the jurisdiction regarding the people, in regards to the rights of the people in lieu of jurisdiction on the land of what they so-called say the people. Then people is just relates to who make up the people, which according to his definition are not natural people. They are corporations, individuals, which we've been trying to tell you from day one. But if you're American, that name fits you because you colonized North America. Any other remarks you want to make to that, Archbishop Belmont?
And like you said, if you calling yourself America, you also are calling yourself a British. They're one and the same. So you can't. So to kind of make a good synopsis of this is remove the term America from everything and then put the word British in there, and then you'll probably see a better picture, because you're still, in their mind, you're still British subjects.
There go the family crest again for you. American history, family crest and coastal arms. Origin, Rome, which is Italy, which goes back into Spain, which goes back into Portugal, all right? Which goes back to the Carolingian dynasty, which, as we showed you yesterday by Odo II, revised the calendar, or assisted and revised the calendar, which we know today as the Gregorian calendar, which we show you by Walter Illen, a guy from Germany, stated that it was fraud, which we've been trying to tell you through our podcast, but y'all failed to listen. Okay? He ain't even from America, and he's validating the non-validity by way of non-attestation of the so-called Gregorian calendar or the Julian calendar, which is preceded by the Berber calendar, which we validated that's conclusive. Okay? So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and we're gonna listen to Taj Tariq Bey.
Can you see it, King?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I'll tell you when to stop it. Did it stop? I can't hear it.
Sorry about that.
Y'all better pay attention to this man.
Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, we're pleased to present once again our National Grand Sheikh, Taj Tariq Bey, as he discusses the truth about land and you. Let's receive him.
Islam, salam, assalamu alaikum, vadi maikum. We're going to talk about land, and we're going to put it in the context that some of you who are less erudite in jurisprudence can recognize and comprehend in relationship to your rights, your estates, your sentient being, and also to ward off much of the dark corruption that has been placed on humanity by the corrupted priesthood across planet Midgard. Now, as we're talking about land, for the sake of many of you who don't deal with jurisprudence or not aware of jurisprudence, we're going to go to Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition of
Listen, y'all.
in modern jurisprudence.
Say it again.
I was telling them to listen.
Oh shoot! What the heck? Hold
It was
on.
a commercial.
No, my stuff just, what in the world? Hold on, I didn't do this.
They don't want us to show it. Give us a second, y'all.
Okay. I don't know what that was all about.
Out and puts in a good word to get him out. We are a holistic.
We back rolling.
Ancient and modern jurisprudence. And so when you look at the contemporary world and the promotion of jurisprudence around the world, you will find that a major part of what is called nature's God, nature's law, or the common law of the ancient Sabian Moors has been promoted out into the world from ancient Phoenicia, or what you call Iberia, or what you call today Europe or Europa.
Stop.
And of course,
Stop. Okay, so he's talking about that Tino map. But he's talking about Europa, he's talking about Asia, and he's talking about Africa. Okay? But he's not making reference to where he's at. He's in what we call America, which is not affiliated with the Afro-Eurasia map, which we showed you. Okay? It said Britain, United Kingdom, i.e. Great Britain, was excluded from Afro-Eurasia map, which leaves it up to the jurisdiction of the Anglo-American map, which in the Anglo-American map, it doesn't show United Kingdom as well. Okay, so they ain't in the picture. That's not Anglo land. Anglo-American land is here in North America. So the only argument we got to make is disqualify America, which we just did, because America are British, America or the 13 colonies who settled America, which is our state. Which Tariq is not from, as you claim, England. He's claiming to be from Moorish/American. So he disqualified himself with being American, and he's also disqualifying himself with being a Moor, because that's Afro-Eurasia, which America is not included yet. All right, go ahead.
People aren't aware of in their geological or geological instructions that what is now called Europe is actually Iberian Peninsula and is actually Phoenicia. So most of our people, not knowing the real history of Asia and Africa, have been mentally and politically disconnected from Iberia by virtue of the German, Dutch-German tribes, hybrid tribes that have been purging Europa, i.e. Iberia, for the last few hundred years. And so the concepts that people have in relationship to Iberia is that it is the homeland of the hybrid Europeans, when in fact that's not true. However, when you hear the statement that anthropologists speak of and historians and sociologists speak of when they refer to the practice of the German-Dutch hybrid Europeans who have been falsely called in modern times as white people, understand that white is a status, it has nothing to do with complexion. Their concepts are that that's the home of the hybrid Europeans, not knowing that that's the homes of the Moors, Dubs, Picts, etc. All of these are Berber people within the Berber linguistic group, i.e. commonly known as Canaanites and Moors, etc. So, and universally known as Moors. And so the jurisprudence that we're speaking of actually has root in ancient African culture of balanced justice. So we're going to read from Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, of ancient and modern jurisprudence to give concepts, clarity concepts to those who who are not aware of jurisprudence. Land. Land, in the most general sense, land comprehends any ground, any soil, or any earth whatsoever, as fields, as meadows, as pastures, as woods, as moors, as waters, as marshes, as furzes, and as heath. Land, in its more limited sense, land denotes the quantity and the character of the interest or estate which the tenant may own in land.
Stop.
And land.
Okay, so he's talking about ownership, right? And what we call North America, which the highest form of land ownership in America, as he just stated, is occupancy or aboriginal title in land. And why is this so? Because of the legal fiction created by common recovery. Now he's going to mention lawyers and barristers, but he's not going to mention the term common recovery. Because remember, he's not in the best interest of what we call now today America, which is the English history, because it's Anglo-America, because it does not mention anything dealing with the Iberian Peninsula, which is known as the Old World. The Old World is the New World, because the New World governs the Old World. All they did is just put a new NEW on it, which we know the origin comes from England, as we did to do justice on the new family crest, the word or the term or the phrase new under the family crest and coastal bond. So he's letting you know he's getting to the history dealing with land, real estate, based off an estate, the assets and net worth, whether the people own the land who belong to the land are dead or alive, in lieu of their right, interest, and entitlement to the land, not in lieu of ownership, but in lieu of occupancy or use. Go ahead.
And may include any estate or interest in lands. It may be legal or equitable, and you also may reference easements or incorporeal hereditaments. So incorporeal hereditaments also deal with abstracts. So you can see the concepts that people have of land as they have been taught in general has been actually limited and heavily reduced. Of course, that has its political purpose. So technically, land signifies everything which may be holden, and the term is defined as comprehending all things of a permanent and substantial nature, and even of an unsubstantial, provided they be permanent. Now, originally, the term land is used as descriptive of the subject of ownership and not the ownership. The subject of ownership and not the ownership itself. Land includes not only the soil of earth or earth, but also things of a permanent nature, affixed thereto, or found therein, whether by nature, whether as water, trees, grass, herbage, other natural and perennial products, growing crops or trees, minerals under the surface, or by the hand of man, as buildings, fixtures, fences, hedges, bridges, as well as works constructed for use of water, such as dikes, canals, etc. So you can see, when you're talking about land, you're also talking about incorporeal things. So you're also talking about traditions and customs of a people who have been established on land, and hereditaments, corporal and incorporeal. So that means inherited things also. So that means the abstract and the concrete. And as you all understand, land as taught to the masses in general under the auspices of colonial operations under the John D. Rockefeller institutions and the Frederick T. Gates institutions, which you know in the Western Hemisphere as the General Education Board, limits the concept of land to the people as simply being the soil. And now you know that it's not limited to that. And so also some things that we want to mention to you so that your concepts are clear is the misuse of dogmatic approach to religions for the purpose of blinding people as to how land is used, how it relates to you. As an example, Yahweh, or what you call, some people say Jehovah,
How many minutes are we in?
H, is
How many
actually
minutes?
the
10:26.
elements of
Okay, keep it there.
the
Pause it here.
No, keep going.
Okay.
substance of the land and the abstract, essentially earth, air, fire, and water, all things that we build things from. Now, the people are told that that is the God being as an entity, while those who teach it know that it actually is the elements, earth, air, fire, and water. Now, and when they mention Allah, they usually think the same way they look at Yahweh or Jehovah as the creator being, when actually Allah is actually the stargate or the gate of the womb or woman herself that brings life to the planet. And therefore, in the reality, the purity of woman and the principle of the divine womb is the only gateway by which the physicality of man manifests on this earth. So therefore, whatever the state of mind of woman, whatever the condition that woman or the womb is in, has much to do with the product that she produces, or how what she brings to the gates of heaven, to the earth, what they are, how they manifest, part of what the destiny of the being or the manifest is. And thus, whatever is born of woman has, in many ways, you might say, must submit to the will of Allah, because she is the creator of the physical form. And so when the priesthood usually teaches about Yahweh and Allah, they will teach the masses that these are different gods, yet the same God type thing, when actually all of these are aspects of the creative forces, etc., and more in the transitive compartment of linguistic communication than actually the concept of the physical God's concepts that are taught to the masses for control purposes. And again, why there are.
Okay, so if he's saying a whole lot of nothing right there, because what he's actually showing the difference between two terms he mentioned, abstract and concrete. Religion as is taught is abstract, meaning that it's spookism. It's no physicalness attached to it. It's all belief versus concrete. Because when he spoke about the land, the elements, that's abstract. Chief Justice Marshall said it in the Supreme Court cases that abstract has no allodial titleship. Nature don't have no fingers. It can't write no charters. Mm-hmm. It can't write no grant deeds and things of that nature. And how can you prove that you existed on the land and sustain that ownership of the land in case somebody else invades, if you're using nature as the source of where your ownership comes from? Because God don't have fingers.
Right.
Any remarks you want to make, Archbishop?
And point of interest, this is the type of talk, it sounds good, trust and believe. Many of us have been hypnotized to this type of speak. And, you know, if you grew up from the streets, this is all pimp talk. So you just got to know what you're listening to, because like they said, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. Excuse my French, but you have to know what you're listening to, because once again, you cannot use this type of conversation in a court of law. That'd be a quick way to get you a psychological evaluation.
And as Archbishop said, you don't see him in the court of law. That's very important, because as we know, you in America, you're not in Afro-Eurasia, right? And you speak in the language of Anglo-American, because American adopted English as their official language. Why? Because America don't have no land or a nation. It's made up of different ethnicity under the guise as American, which we know the origin of the word American, or the term American, or the phrase American, goes back to Italy, who colonized, who settled, who do colonialism. Absolutely. All right? So he's speaking it, but he's about to get deeper, because he's going to go into the definition of person, because he's making reference to the real property, i.e. the land, which everything comes from. But as a foreigner who settles this land, you have no rights to it. You only have the right to occupancy and possession by way of use, fee and simple. Go ahead and read.
A priesthood will teach these different aspects.
How many minutes we have?
Forms of life.
It's 12 minutes, 51 seconds in.
Okay, go ahead.
And that which makes up life in both the abstract, or what people call the ethereal world, and some refer to it as the spiritual world, and then the three-dimensional physical world, etc. And all of
Stop. So y'all need to make a choice right now between how y'all want to deal with y'all physical selves. In the spiritual world, abstract, or in the physical world, from an abstract understanding or from a concrete understanding. Because concrete is something that you can touch, that's tangible, that you can see, you can touch, you can feel, you can smell. Abstract is just based off a perception or a presumption that's abstract until proven otherwise. Okay, and he's leaving out the definition of what abstract and concrete mean. He's using the word loosely in reference to a territory which he's not indigenous of. He's a Moor. Moor, as we're going to show you, were not the ones who granted the right or ownership to the land, which under fee and simple. If you were born here under just sanguinis or just soil, then you don't have to be granted anything. It's yours by right of birth. You are heir. And we're going to show you that without the laws that preceded colonization, i.e. the 13 British colonies, you have no rights.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Less so in the concepts that have been taught to the masses. And the masses, for the most part, are not aware that the priesthood, for the most part, is dirty. And that they have actually put the world in darkness for their own personal means. It's another reason why we're talking about land. And then you must also look at sea. So the sea, or the water, when you're looking at the cosmology of prophetic projection, or what you would call astrological calculation and projection, whether you're turning the clock forward or turning the clock back, and dealing with the geometry of the compass and the square, which is commonly referred to by people as the carpenter's tools that they talk to you about in the Septuaginta and the Bible as Jesus being a carpenter. Of course, Jesus, anthropomorphic, is the man or the expression in the physical form, but in the cosmological nature, it is actually the Son of God, actually in the heavens, etc. And of course, the transits of the sun, and of course, the geometric calculations and positionings, or what you call the calculations of the position of the sun, the cycle placement of the sun in relationship to the cycle placement of the moon and the earth, and our calculations of cause and effect. And this is what makes up the ephemeris that is at the basis of or used mathematically to both do what you call charting. The wise men who have always followed the stars, etc. How they do projections, how they do prophecy, mathematically according to the heavens, and also how they project or plan government operations, government structure, etc. And of course, while simplistic in its nature,
We're coming to it now.
in fact, it is often told to the people or presented to the people as something complex or super abstract. And so they just give some of that knowledge to the people in the anthropomorphic formats that they project in dogmatic religion. As most of you know, even when they're talking about the seven sisters, etc., or Santa Claus's sleigh, you're simply talking about the lead star, which is, or they're making reference to the lead star, Sirius, often referred to as the dog star, and also Rudolph the reindeer's nose, etc. That's for children, but actually they're talking about Sirius, the dog star. And of course, that has much to do with cosmological culture on Earth. And this is also used as a guide also for navigation and operations on Midgard, etc. And also for traveling even when you're on the waters. Now, in reference to waters, with the Dark Priesthood using or misusing or misrepresenting Asiatic African culture and cosmology, Gnostic philosophies.
Let's go to the next one. Bring
Foundation.
up the next one. He talking about a whole bunch of nothing.
Okay, here's the other one.
This is the one I thought it was going to be in this one, but it's actually this one. The one I sent you, we just heard, was the one I originally sent you. This one is the one I wanted.
Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, as always, we are pleased to present our National Grand Chief, Taj Tariq Bey, as he presents the seriousness of comprehending jurisdiction. Let's welcome him.
Listen, y'all.
Shalom, assalamu alaikum, miyam alaikum. I want to discuss again, and we've done this over the last few decades with you all, the issue of jurisdiction / jurisdictions, and the importance of our people having and being presented with a comprehensive, reasonably comprehensive comprehension and dissertation on the subject matter of jurisdiction. And the fact of the matter is, the issue of jurisdiction is not discussed enough among our people, in so much as the fact that everything that is done in social structure, in governmental principles, in running government, in dealing with rights and liberties, in dealing with rights of property, or the lack thereof, in dealing with a challenge or a question or any controversy concerning rights, properties, estates, inheritances, both corporal and incorporal, territories on the aggregate land, rulership on the aggregate.
Stop. You know what he said? he's dealing with estates, whether movable or non-movable, i.e., property, real property or personal property, in regards to aggregate estates. He didn't say sold. He said aggregate, because those who own the land is not but companies. Companies are made up of people who exist outside of the company who makes it up. It's like when you work for a company, when you go punch the clock, you start work. When you go home, punch the clock, you go back to your private life. But based off the settlement certificate, i.e. birth certificate, which is the deed or instrument, is qualified by way of you being awarded the estate by the legal fiction defined by the term person, which governs your estate, because you are not the natural person. You are the term individual, which is defined under Title 13, Chapter 161, as part of the population. Once again, it's defined as the individual, corporation, firm, etc. Go ahead.
The exercise of powers and the matters concerning authority operating on the land or in a political jurisdiction limited on the land, and the knowledge of the border lines, both aggregate and also abstract, in relationship to organized government and, of course, organized society.
Stop it right there.
And also with the determination.
Stop it right there. So he said abstract and aggregate relative to the government. Listen what he said. He said abstract and aggregate relative to the government. So we know that abstract means something that's not concrete, something that's not real, right? And he said aggregate, which means a group that's not real. So we the people make up the government. So if we the people make up the government, I ain't talking about me and Archbishop and the King's Bench, members of the Church of England. We're not talking about us. We're talking about those who are classified as American citizens are aggregate, what's it, aggregate, what's the other term?
Visual.
Now, what's the aggregate, what was the term he just said?
Abstract.
Abstract, yeah, he said abstract, aggregate people who make up or are part of the central government. All right, that's why. Listen, y'all.
In relationship to economic interchanges, trust systems which operate in government and in everyday affairs of economics, in relationship to estates, in relationship to inheritances, etc. And as you all know, these things or matters concern us every day in our everyday affairs. However, when you speak to our people in many of these areas of concern, you'll find that many of us are inadequate in relationship to comprehending jurisdiction and the importance of it, and also with many not recognizing that it affects every phase of your life in interchanging with other members of the human kindred and families, etc. So we're going to go over a few things.
So he spoke about abstract, aggregate members who are part of the central government and lieu of acting or affiliating themselves or what they call interacting with the natural and the human family. So there's a difference. One is abstract and one is concrete. The abstract are those who using arguments such as you're a part of nature, you were born on the land, but no concrete evidence to support your claim. Because any claim change of jurisdiction must be heard in regards to an estate in a probate court.
Yep.
Any assets containing to the estate, whether it's movable or non-movable, must be heard in a probate court. The word probate means to prove. And in regards to the probate, in lieu of the beneficiary is the child. The beneficiary is the child, which are you. But you can't receive your estate because you're awarded the estate by way of the definition of the ward of the state, which is considered what they call a person, which Taj is going to totally admit and agree with, as we've been teaching you, according to abstract understanding and not a concrete understanding, because you don't see him produce any document, any legislative law, any statute to support what he's saying. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Any arguments, statements you want to make, Archbishop?
And I want to say, the point made, like you said, he's not presenting any type of evidence to corroborate his claim, which makes it not conclusive or presumptive.
It makes it not, it's not conclusive, but it's presumptive, like you said.
So this is very important, people, is you need to make sure that these so-called leaders you're following, make sure they present the documents that they're claiming to utilize to help so-called teach you. Because if you can't go verify and see it word for yourself, then that can be the blind leading the blind.
Exactly.
As usual, take pen and paper and write down some of these things, because these are points of reference that you're going to use in for tonight and also in the future. And also, whenever you're addressing, as an example, any contract, constitution, treaties, recognition of the connections between those instruments and or the lack thereof, the identification of parties in controversy in relationship to estates, land grants, land ownership or land claims or jurisdiction or power over land, taxation, the lack of power to tax, the alleged or claimed authority to tax, etc. The one or the persons who use political jurisdictions and or venues to issue or make claim or command a tax. All of these things concern jurisdiction. And you know from probably your own experiences, and we've experienced it over the years, even when people begin to do a little study and research, you'll see that there's a continuous weakness in the area of comprehending jurisdiction. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the questions politically and economically that affect our people, and that will come up in different conversations relative to jurisprudence, which is the science that treats of positive law in society, period, coming from ancient Canaanite Moabite, i.e., and promoted around the world in organized structure by the Moors, etc., which is and are the Asiatic Africans collectively, etc.
Stop. So once again, he's making reference to in his states, whether land, i.e. Property, real property, or personal property, in regards to your interest in it. And he makes reference to parties involved in the so-called interest rights entitlement of the so-called estate here in North America, which is not affiliated with Afro-Europe, or Asia. You're in America making a claim, and you're a colonizer in America.
Absolutely.
So you have no right to own property, nor use property by way of you being the colonizer, because it was taken by force.
Absolutely.
And everything that you own is by way of abstract, aggregate abstract. Why? Because none of the parties who, you got a difference. You got aggregate and sole. Sole means the office held by one person, i.e. a natural person. Aggregate is a bunch of people who work for a corporation, which are corporations themselves, without what they call a monarch. Because the monarch is the corporate soul. Look up the word corporate soul. It's either a monarch or a secretary of state. All certificates of incorporation are filed with the Secretary of State. So you must understand that he's speaking to you in an abstract claim. Because he mentions anything to do with a contract claim in regards to ownership of property, i.e. in relative to the assets, i.e. estate, in regards to the people, i.e. whether they're dead or alive, must be dealt with in what we call orphan court or probate court, which he's about to mention.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have a right to just sanguineous and just soil, because your ethnicity is not of the indigenous people of the soil, because that we established already, America is a colonization term that was given by people who came over here to the land that was under the jurisdiction of what we call Anglo-Saxon, which we know Anglo origin, according to the family crest, is France. This was undermined from the 13th to the 17th century, from the House of Tudors or the Plantation, which me and Archbishop Belmont from the King's Bench have been telling y'all from day one.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go.
Specific Moorish jurisdictions, etc., and they will have territorial nomenclatures, etc., that will distinguish the territorial provinces and kingdoms, etc., and having a proper concept of those jurisdictions will remove a lot of confusion that exists among the people. And keep in mind that lack of knowledge and lack of information in relationship to political jurisdictions, social structure jurisdictions, estate jurisdictions, etc., rights and powers and exercises of,
Not right there.
etc.
So you notice when he said he mentioned the different classification. You notice he mentioned the word extinct. Extinct. All right. So extinct means something that don't exist no more. It did exist at one time, but it's not extinct anymore. But as we can see, he's not claiming something that's extinct, because the Moorish Americans and their claim is based off presumptuous claim that goes back to Afro-Eurasia, which was part of the old world. So that should be presumed as being conclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, though.
Yep.
Over there, but you ain't over there, you over here. And we're proving today that it's not conclusive, it's presumptive in nature. Because you have now established any instrument to support your claim in lieu of the estate. Because you didn't mention the charter and anything since we heard in this one we're listening to. You said treaties,
And
constitutions, but you never said charter. Okay, go ahead.
Has been lacking in our community. So I want you to write some of these things down, which I'm going to read to you, and you'll do, say, some research on your own in the future. At the same time, have some references to what we will discuss in general tonight, and then not be necessarily what you call wanting in your comprehension of what jurisdiction is about and the seriousness and importance of it, because it operates every day in all your affairs. Jurisdiction in general. So jurisdiction in general. Now this is ancient and modern jurisprudence. Henry Campbell Black's 4th edition.
Stop. So listen, y'all, he said modern and ancient. Okay, so if you follow the trail from modern and ancient, how the hell you miss England?
Exactly.
How did you miss that? You all the way in the old world dealing with Afro, Europe, and Asia, but the ones who gave authority to the American colonies that now what we call America was the one was issued by the Parliament of Great Britain, which consists of Ireland, Scotland, and which is predated by England.
Mm-hmm.
That's the father country. The mother country is Scotland, which we can prove conclusively the history relative to the people who exist at that time, which was no other than the Berber people.
Absolutely.
He's not calling himself a Berber. He's identifying with the word Moor, which goes back to, in the modern sense, when you look at the word Moor, it's dealing with Ottoman Turks, who are used or identify themselves and associate themselves with the term Berber, which that did not originate in what we call Afro-Eurasia. it originated in what we call England.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
In point of interest, the very language that he's speaking is English.
It's in English.
It's in English. So if you're calling yourself a Moor, which we know the term Moor, M-O-O-R, goes back to England. So if Morrison wants to say that they're not English, then what are you? And if you're not that, you must be speaking the language that denotes who you are today in this time and era.
Exactly. How is you impersonate somebody?
Absolutely.
That's a violation of law. You know, you're if I go and pose as the president, guess what will happen?
You're going to jail.
You're going to jail. All right, go ahead.
etc. Deluxe edition. Jurisdiction. Now the word jurisdiction is a term of large and comprehensive import and embraces every kind of judicial action. Keep that in mind. I'm going to repeat because you really got to get this down, get this clear in your mind. Jurisdiction is a word and a term of large and comprehensive import and embraces every kind of judicial action. Are we clear? Now, jurisdiction is the authority by which courts and judicial officers take cognizance of and decide cases, meaning that authority that.
Okay, so he's dealing with judicial system. Judicial system is the highest, from our understanding, because they qualify conclusively what the law is. If there's any discrepancy that comes from the executive and legislative branch, it's the judicial branch who decides that. And in this day and time, it's called the King's Bench. We're showing you what's abstract and what's concrete in regards to the estate that you're residing on, which is not called America. This is Normandy you're standing in, composed of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers from the English Church of England, which is contrast to what you're hearing today from Taj Tariq, who belongs over there in what we call Afro-Eurasia.
Absolutely.
Okay? Continue on.
Is used or which is delegated to them under standing or established law that is made is presented as in a term of law, their license to act in a limited capacity in relationship to making judgments and decisions in harmony with the construct of treaty, constitution, or trust assigned to them with its limited parameters that would be within a construct or what you would call a document of that may be called a delegation of authority order.
Stop. Stop. So this man he do not want to say charter. He don't want to say charter. He went around that word. He mentioned constitution, he mentions treaty, then he mentions trust. Why would you use trust, constitution, and treaty in the same language if you're not an heir? Because America does not heirs to what they call the trust of the ones who granted the land, because he just said it that America colonized it. We just said America colonized it, and he's part American. Which American colonized America, as well as Moors colonized America, because it's from a whole other territory that's not on the continent, what we call now today America, which is falsely misnomer. Okay, why? Because we know America, actually, i.e. Great Britain, i.e. the 13 colonies, got their charter, which today is now called a constitution. A constitution is the charter, y'all, because it said it has limited power based off the instrument. That's the contract and agreement between two parties, between the grantor and the grantee, which makes them tenures. These are their holdings. Okay, so they occupy an aggregate position, not corporate soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you see the seats continue to pass from presidency from one to another. They can't act in the capacity of a monarch. All right, go ahead.
Power of attorney. In principle, this is what is meant when someone claims or is exercising power over another being designated as a natural person, because person also means corporation. So when you just say person, they may be, you need to understand jurisdiction, because then there's the jurisdiction of the living, and then there's the jurisdiction of the dead. And when you have corrupt operators or persons who are claiming jurisdiction, and they are aware of the fact that many of the masses do not understand jurisdiction, what they have often done and what they've been doing, and which is also one of the motivations of me bringing this subject matter up, is that they will mix deliberately or transfer the corpse or the dead corporate entities that they may construct under legislative cause or legislative action that may have no relationship whatsoever by obligation or authority to the targeted beings or persons, natural persons, and designate them as dead, i.e. simulator mortis, under the guise of a corporate structure, which
Stop. Now, the King's Bench have told you about common recovery.
Mm-hmm.
We spoke to you about that. Now Taj is saying the same thing. He's just not using the case law because he don't know about that. He's using the term that's abstractly understood as a legal fiction or corporate construct or what they call what's the other term? Civil libera mortis, dead in the eyes of law. But doesn't understand the origin of where it originated from. Because you understand it from a modern term or a modern interpretation. When you got to go back to how you got in this condition by way of what they call common recovery, which was already abolished if you were an English citizen. If you're not an English citizen, then it still applies to you.
Absolutely. Because you're a colonizer.
Go ahead, Archbishop.
And point of interest, and that's what, for them to keep you in enslavement, they have to keep you, like Taj said, a so-called person, which is a corporation, and Americans are a corporation. Y'all came over here to work. So, so as you can, and you kind of notice today, that's all so-called Americans want to do. They want to work. Even when the planet right now needs to rest, because our Berber ancestors knew we had to rest the land so that way we can have fruit or have a future. If you constantly keep working the land, what's going to happen is going to become depleted and die. So as you see, these settlers came over here to keep commerce or commercial businesses going on, i.e. slavery, because they have enslaved the planet. So they didn't just enslave you, they enslaved the planet itself. And you pay attention to these slicksters because they're letting you know what they're doing and how they have you underneath that spell.
Exactly. And the only way you can, as Archbishop stated, is rest the earth by way of it being able to preserve itself so that you may be able to plant again. So the rest, what we're doing is allowing you to rest.
Mm-hmm.
Put down your pitchforks, put down your pens, put down those old books, right? Put them in the bag for now.
Absolutely.
We're not saying get rid of them, but put them in the bag and set them right next to you.
Exactly.
Okay? You ain't gotta leave them, just put them in the bag, all right? Then listen to the books that we're presenting to you in our bag. Put that on the table. Take a look at that, right? Once you do that, now you can pick up your book, put all that on the table, and start the process of elimination.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And there you have a conclusive, concrete understanding about who and what and where you are and what you were here designed to do.
Absolutely.
But Taj is not giving you the ability to do that. He just got books in the bag, but ain't got them out on the table. But want you to believe that's what's in the bag. But how we know there ain't a bunch of coloring books in there?
Mm-hmm.
All right, go ahead.
is currently the practice at North America, and it has been used constantly and consistently by members of the Circle Church and the Chancery, which you know as the Bar Association or the British Accredited or Registry. These people are known as lawyers and attorneys, etc., under the Bar Association, which is a foreign jurisdiction. That
Stop.
anyone.
So now he know it's a bunch of lawyers, but he don't know about common recovery because he don't know a thing about England when it was taken over. His records don't go back that far. All he knows is that a bunch of lawyers did it. But where do the lawyers get their training from? England. So in order for you to understand the origin of what we call stare decisis, i.e. case law, which created from parliamentary, i.e. statutory law, which common law is discerned from. And if there's ambiguity, i.e. in the so-called statute or in the case law, then it's up for the judge to determine based off the statutory law what the case law should be interpreted as.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. One who claims to be a lawyer or an attorney operating on the land at North America under the jurisdiction of Morocco or the jurisdiction of occupational corporate operation designated as United States Service Trading Company, etc., that jurisdictional power would be designated by virtue of a contract via treaty or constitution. The distinction must always be.
So he mentioned Morocco as well, operating over here based off a treaty or a constitution, but they did not mention charter. All right, so we're going to end on Taj Tariq. This is a witness to the testimony that we're bringing in regards to what they're doing is not only abstract, but presumptive in nature in regards to him being the heir and rights to allodial, i.e. intel land based off him being the heir and the trust based off that was passed down from your ancestors in this territory and not with a part of Afro-Eurasia, which excluded what we call United Kingdom, which did not just extend there, but it extended here west, which we now call today North America. Okay, so now we're going to end this King's Judicial Notice with the King's Bench gavel, which governs stare decisis, i.e. common law, in reference to our ancestors, a state being subject to subjugation, which is why the King's Bench had issued what they call a court warranto in lieu of their donors conditionalibus on why the colonizers or the settler, i.e. American 13 colonies, are doing what they're doing on land that does not belong to them, in lieu of qui impetuoris. And we're going to show you that there are laws already in place for you to be able to raise these issues that Taj is not teaching you.
Absolutely.
Why? Because Taj don't have a right to teach you this. Why? Because he's a foreigner as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's close your screen, Archbishop Belmont, and come to our closing.
I can go ahead and share yours. Okay. In point of interest, brothers and sisters, so Taj showed you, and he's speaking to you for you Moors, but we're going to also show you that what you're doing, if you agree with this information, then you're accepting, you're admitting that you're not only an imposter on foreign land, but you're also keeping up the fraud today against the true English nationals over here in i.e. so-called America.
Exactly. Justia. Justia is an American website specialized in legal information retrieval. It was founded in 2003 by Tim Stanley, formerly of FindLaw, and is one of the largest online databases of legal cases. The company is headquartered in Mountain View, California. The websites offer free case law, codes, opinions, summaries, and other basic legal text with paid services for its attorneys, directing, and web hosting, which is free for the public view. So there's no excuse why you should not know this, because it's free.
Mm-hmm.
The Archbishop King Bench ain't charging you a thing. Why? Because it's free.
Free.
So if you see these podcasts talking about PayPal and Cash App me this and all that, they are scams.
Exactly. They're pimping you.
They pimping you. Pope, that's what the word Pope means. Pimp.
Yeah.
Look it up yourself. We showed you the family crest of the word Pope, which means pimp. So the Pope is pimping you. America is pimping you because America comes from Italy, where Rome was established, which is pimping you. Okay? So let's hear it from the horse's mouth. Read from Archbishop.
Historical note on the formation of the Constitution. In June 1774, the Virginia and Massachusetts Assemblies independently proposed an intercolonial meeting of delegates from the several colonies to restore union and harmony between Great Britain and her American colonies.
Stop right there. So we know that America and Great Britain were all colonies, because we know that the 13 colonies are the colonists known as the British colonies or the American colonies, which are the same people. We know that America just broke away from Great Britain to establish their new self-classification. And we know as dependencies of Rome, because they were all Protestant, because the first colony in Virginia and Massachusetts was from the House of Stuart.
Absolutely.
All right, from the House of Stuart. And their authority came from Elizabeth I under the House of Tudors, who gave everybody the teaching to be able to come over here and what we call North America, do what we call the reformation of the English Church of England and the Protestant Church, to be able to steal our birthright by reclassifying themselves as the beneficiary of the estates, which were left in the trust, which has now been overdue by what we call common recovery, but it's tied to reach this validated by way of creating legal fixtures identified by the word, phrase, term, persons. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Read, Archbishop Belmont.
Pursuant to these calls, there met in Philadelphia in September of that year the First Continental Congress, composed of delegates from 12 colonies. On October 14, 1774, the Assembly adopted what has become to be known as the Declaration and Resolves of the First Continental Congress.
Okay, stop. So this is before they got their independence from Great Britain. So that means the colonies is actually Great Britain at this time, as we define the 13 colonies, which is American colonies or the British colonies, because they didn't claim their independence till ratification of January 14, 1784. Okay, so America and British are all colonization or colonizers or settlers on land that don't belong to them, which we're going to prove by Justia. Continue to read.
In point of interest, make a note, the word declaration, it does not have any type of meaning or enforceability as a law. So just because someone is given a declaration, that doesn't mean that it's a law. It just means I'm saying something out of my mouth when I'm putting it down on paper, but it doesn't mean it holds value or hold any type of weight.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So known as the Declaration and Resolves of the First Continental Congress, in that instrument addressed to His Majesty and to the people of Great Britain, there was embodied a statement of rights and principles, many of which were later to be incorporated in the Declaration of Independence and the Federal Constitution.
Stop right there. Now we know Thomas Jefferson signed the Declaration of Independence. Now, if you go back here to American Frontier on the Manifest Destiny, this is how they got their authority to be able to create what they call the New World. Right? So Jefferson, i.e. Godfrey, which was the plantation crown under Normandy, had the right under the fee and tail, which was left for the heirs, which was stolen by Thomas Jefferson with the purchase of Louisiana, which was inhabited by what we call France.
Mm-hmm.
Before they were colonized by the Roman through the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th century under what we call Philip II of France, Henry I of France, going all the way back to William the Conqueror, which was a Northman who invaded what we call what we call Maine. All right, which is part of the Dominion of England, which was derived from the Kingdom of England. That goes back to our ancestral estate.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to where we was.
This Congress adjourned in October with a recommendation that that another Congress be held in Philadelphia the following May. Before its successor met, the Battle of Lexington had been fought. In Massachusetts, the colonists had organized their own government in defiance, that means against, defiance of the royal governor and the crown. Hence, by general necessity and by common consent, the Second Continental Congress assumed control of the 12 United Colonies, soon to become the 13 United Colonies, by the cooperation of Georgia. It became a de facto government. It called upon
Okay,
other
hold
colonies.
on. Let's look to define this for them. De facto, because you always hear Taj talk about de facto and de jure. Let's see what de facto means. Y'all see that, right? In fact, or in effect, whether by right or not, often contrast with de jure. Okay? So they don't have the authority to do so. Why? But they're doing it in the de facto status. Go ahead and read, brother.
It called upon the other colonies to assist in the defense of Massachusetts. It issued bills of credit. It took steps to organize a military force and appointed George Washington commander-in-chief of the army. So once
Go ahead, Archbishop.
So once they became de facto, everything that they did was against the law. They were in defiance of the ones who gave them their so-called charter for them to be able to do what they did. So as you can see, this is the Roman Protestants so-called breaking away from Rome. But as a colony, if you look at the definition of colony, it shows you that colony still has its connection to its mother country, i.e. colony comes from Rome. So that means these people are still Roman subjects no matter what they do, because all that they're doing is against the so-called Roman law.
Exactly. And if you have self-classified yourself from your birthright under your ethnicity by way of your surname, then you deserve what you get.
Absolutely.
You deserve what you get. They telling you to change the name to Abdullah and El and Bey. All that is part of Afro-Eurasia, which has no jurisdiction, as Taj is teaching you here in what we call Anglo-Saxon territory. Before it became a state, it was subject to English territory by way of charter, which Taj has failed to mention in both podcasts that we showed you today. Why? Because he doesn't have jurisdiction to do so. Why? Because he is not an heir. Mm-hmm. We are heirs. Why? Because we're English Anglo-Saxon Berbers from the English Church of England, where all the charters were granted in lieu of what we call their charters, which is the Constitution and what we call treaties. Exactly. And we're gonna come to our closing with the gavel from the King's Bench in regards to modern day statute in regards to the authority that's protected in lieu of the statute from New Jersey. All right, let's go here.
So point of interest, once again, this is your wake-up call. We're letting you know if you're supporting any of those so-called treaties that came after them so-called breaking away from their mother colony or country, which is Rome, you're all in violation. And therefore, you all are subject to whatever Rome decides to give to you, because don't think they ain't paying attention. They already know, and they're ready.
Okay. Read this, Archbishop, in closing. And once again, I got to give honor to Archbishop Belmont, Master of the Rose. This is a fine work that he's doing on behalf of English subjects of the King. And as once again, when you watch those movies, the barons and the bishops in the church running around with scrolls in their hand, think of our bishop in that same manner, because this is from him, you know. And he serves his king well, and for much is given, much is required, and it's an obligation that you all must take. Failure to do so shows no fealty to your church, and therefore you should be excommunicado.
Absolutely, and let me interject on that again. And so you, those angels who coming in or ready to get your wings, that doesn't mean that you just stepping into the church and you're saved. You must go out here and do this work and teach this to the masses until we have our 144,000 sealed like it was supposed to be done. If I see you not actually out here spreading the message and doing the work, I'm taking note, and I will let the king know who's actually doing their due diligence and who's not, because this is not a remedy. This is not something you just coming in and just eating off of, because for you to protect your church, you have to fight for her. So if you don't want to put any type of fight in, then you need to go ahead and stay asleep underneath Rome.
Exactly. And as I stated earlier in this podcast, that there's a road that many are called, but few will travel. And in that road, it leads uphill. And there's many people who claim to make it to the top of the mountain. And as they come down, and the person making that flight asks the question about what they've seen in their path. And each one that he encountered had a different story to tell. So the object of what we're trying to tell you is to show you that all things leads to one path. But what we're trying to tell you is that do not skip steps. Do not skip the steps that we're giving you, because this way you won't have to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't got to worry about what somebody said in their encounter, because they might not make it to the end pass. And this is what we're trying to tell you. So we're going to the source from where the power comes from, which is the
Absolutely.
Church of England, which we're ancestors. Why? Because we speak the language and we have the name. The only thing that's left for us to do is honor it. So at the closing of this reading, at the voice of the Master of the Roll, Archbishop Belmont, Master of the King's Bench, in lieu of his king, Clifford Jefferson, descended from Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, under his father, Pope V, King of Jerusalem, I leave you in these closings. Peace. I can't hear you, Archbishop.
Okay, sorry about that. 1 second. All right, so the colonists, for example, claimed the right to life, liberty, and property, the rights, liberties, and immunities of free and natural-born subjects within the realm of England, the right to participate in legislative councils, the great and inestimable privilege of being tried by their peers of the vicinage, according to the course of the common law of England, the immunities and privileges granted and confirmed to them by royal charters or secured by their several codes of provincial laws, a right peaceably to assemble, consider of their grievances, and petition the king. They further declared that the keeping of a standing army in the colonies in time of peace, without the consent of the colony in which the army was kept, was against the law, that it was indispensably necessary to good government and rendered essential by the English Constitution, that the constituent branches of the legislature be independent of each other.
Stop. Do y'all hear this? Do y'all hear this? So this is treason, y'all. It said independent of each other. But they're not independent.
So we're talking about the United States for when you're supposed to be
Exactly.
independent.
This is what done in 1843 and the amendment of the Constitution of 1776, which is now under the Constitution of 43, somewhere in 1942, 1943. But the separation of state was done, which was a violation of the separation of state was supposed to be uniform in regards to the what we call the clarity. They were independent. It said the colony in which the army was kept was against the law, that it was indispensable, necessary to good government, and rendered essential by English Constitution, that the constitutional branch of legislature be independent of each other, that certain acts of parliament in contravention of the foregoing principles were infringement and violations of the rights of the colonists. So we got to be careful, brothers and sisters. When you're seeing the word independent, that's a violation of law. So they mix truth and falsehood, because under parliamentary law, they were not supposed to be separate. They were supposed to be together.
Absolutely.
because that's how there will be no need for stare decisis, common law, because all of them based off the legislative law. Executive will pass a law, legislative pass a law, executive execute the law, and judicial upholds it. So there should be no separation of branches of law. It should be all uniform. But that was done when England took out the picture. And when you see it says England, everything is being done under the auspices of England, but yet these are not English descendants. They are
Absolutely.
British subjects known as the 13 colonies, because this statute originated from members of the 13 colonies, but yet it mentions the Royal Charters. Royal Charters were issued by Great Britain, which were in violation of the charters that were given to those American, i.e. Great Britain, which was based off the minor, which was the Queen Anne in 1714, which was a Roman Catholic Protestant who got their authority from the House of Tudors under Queen Elizabeth I, who was a relative or related to King Henry VIII, son of King Henry VII, which got their authority by what we call right of conquest, which is the colonization of our state by establishing what they call Anglo-Saxon Normandy. And with that, I'm going to say peace.
Peace, family. I mean, once again, there's nothing much more to say. We already proved to you that, everything that you're doing underneath the auspices of being either American, British, or more on so-called America, which is actually English land or Normandy, you're all in violation. So you make your choice. You make your bed, you lie in it. We're not forcing anybody to be what they don't want to be, because as you can see, these same invaders broke away from their mother and father. So we can't expect them to do the right thing when they're not even honoring the blood that they come from.
Exactly. And in closing, let me just show in lieu of this Justia, let's go back here to Dominion of England, which is modern day, 1687. This is the House of Stuart, which shows all of what we call New England, which of course came from this, the Kingdom of England, which goes back to the 10th century, okay? Which, if you see, these are our symbols. These are our heroic coats of arms that we use in present day. That's protected from the time immemorial, which goes back to the Plantagenet crown. So ain't nothing we do is abstract, y'all. It's concrete, and we got a modern day judicial notice in regards to historical law, and which the Constitution of the New England derives from, which is Old England. With that, I'll say peace.
Peace.